Marcus Williams sat in his rusted pickup truck outside the abandoned steel mill, watching the sun disappear behind the skeletal remains of what used to be his livelihood. 3 years had passed since the plant closed, taking with it not just his job, but seemingly everything that mattered. His wife Sarah had left 6 months ago, unable to bear watching him drink himself into oblivion night after night. She took Emma, their 8-year-old daughter, and moved across the country to live with her sister. The bottle of whiskey on the passenger seat caught the last rays of sunlight, amber liquid sloshing as Marcus reached for it with trembling hands. He'd been coming to this spot every evening for weeks now, drawn to the place where his father had once worked, where he himself had put in 15 years before the economy crashed around them all. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight felt like an ending. As darkness settled over the industrial wasteland, Marcus noticed something odd in the sky. A bright light, too steady to be a plane, too large to be a star, descended slowly toward the earth about a mile away. He squinted through the windshield, his alcohol-fogged mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The light grew brighter, closer, until it disappeared behind a cluster of abandoned warehouses. Curiosity, or perhaps simple human instinct, made him turn the ignition key. The truck coughed to life, and Marcus found himself driving toward where the light had landed. The whiskey bottle rolled around the cab as he navigated the potholed access road, but for the first time in months, he didn't reach for it. The spacecraft sat in a clearing between two demolished buildings, its surface smooth and opalescent like polished abalone shell. It was smaller than Marcus had expected from the movies, about the size of a small RV, and it hummed with a low, almost musical vibration that he could feel in his chest. As he stepped out of his truck, legs unsteady from both alcohol and adrenaline, a section of the craft's hull simply faded away like morning mist. The being that emerged defied every science fiction stereotype Marcus had ever encountered. It wasn't gray or green or insectoid. Instead, it appeared almost human-like, but with skin that shifted color like oil on water, and eyes that held depths of kindness that seemed impossibly ancient. It moved with careful, deliberate grace, as if every step was considered and intentional. The creature stopped about 10 feet away and tilted its head, studying Marcus with those profound eyes. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Marcus's mind, gentle and warm like a voice remembered from childhood. "You are in pain," it said simply. "Your soul carries a weight that grows heavier each day." Marcus wanted to run, wanted to drive away and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, he found himself laughing bitterly. "Great, even aliens can see what a mess I am." He gestured toward the whiskey bottle visible through his truck window. "You picked a hell of a night to visit Earth, friend. I'm not exactly humanity's best representative right now." The being's skin shifted to softer hues, blues and purples swirling like a gentle tide. "I am called Zephyr in concepts your mind can grasp. I did not choose this location randomly, Marcus Williams. I came here because of you, because your pain calls across the void like a beacon." "How do you know my name?" Marcus's voice cracked, and he hated how small he sounded. "I know many things about you. I know you built a treehouse for your daughter Emma last summer, even though your hands shook from withdrawal. I know you read her stories about brave knights and clever princesses over video calls, hiding your tears when she couldn't see. I know you loved your work not for the money, but because it connected you to your father's memory, and losing it felt like losing him all over again." Marcus staggered backward, overwhelmed by the intimacy of this stranger's knowledge. "What are you, some kind of cosmic therapist?" Zephyr's form seemed to pulse with gentle light. "I am what you might call a healer, though not of bodies. My people have learned that consciousness creates ripples across space and time. Profound suffering like yours sends waves that sensitive beings can detect from very far away. We've been monitoring your species for some time, watching as you struggle with problems that seem insurmountable but are actually quite solvable." "Solvable?" Marcus laughed harshly. "My wife left me. My kid barely knows me anymore. I haven't had a real job in 3 years. I'm about as far from solvable as you can get." "Your species has a remarkable trait," Zephyr continued, seemingly unbothered by Marcus's skepticism. "You possess an extraordinary capacity for resilience and growth, even in your darkest moments. But you also have a tendency to believe that strength means carrying burdens alone. This is where you go wrong." The alien moved closer, and Marcus noticed that its presence somehow made the air feel cleaner, more breathable. "I have come to offer you something, Marcus Williams. Not magic, not miracles, but perspective. Will you allow me to show you something?" Marcus looked back at his truck, at the bottle that had been his constant companion for months. Then he looked at this impossible being that somehow knew his deepest shames and still spoke to him with kindness. What kind of something? I want to show you how your pain connects to something larger. How your struggles, as personal as they feel, are part of a pattern that exists throughout the universe. And how beings like you, despite your perceived failures, represent something truly remarkable among all the species we have encountered. The whiskey bottle seemed very far away now. Marcus wiped his nose with the back of his hand and nodded slowly. I've got nowhere else to be. Zephyr's skin brightened, and for the first time since Sarah left, Marcus felt something other than crushing despair. He felt curious. Zephyr extended what appeared to be a hand, though it shifted and flowed like liquid starlight. This will not hurt, but it may overwhelm your senses initially. I am going to share with you what we call the greater pattern. Marcus hesitated only a moment before reaching out. The moment their skin touched, reality exploded into something vast and interconnected. Suddenly he could perceive the universe not as empty space punctuated by lonely planets, but as a web of consciousness stretching across galaxies. Every thinking being was a node in this cosmic network, their thoughts and emotions creating currents of energy that flowed between star systems. Do you see it? Zephyr's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The Korthani Empire spans 3 galaxies and they have mastered technology beyond your imagination, yet when their children suffer from existential despair, they simply give up. They accept it as an inevitable part of consciousness. Marcus saw flashes of crystalline beings on worlds of perpetual twilight, their great cities falling into decay as entire populations succumbed to collective melancholy. They're beautiful, he whispered. Yes, but observe. The vision shifted to show the Velan insected creatures with minds like living computers. Their society eliminated suffering through total emotional regulation. No pain, but also no joy, no growth, no surprise. They exist in perfect, sterile equilibrium. The images were stunning and terrible. Worlds where beings had achieved technological godhood but lost the spark that made existence meaningful. Civilizations that had solved every material problem but couldn't understand why their people still felt empty inside. And then, Zephyr's mental voice carried a note of something Marcus could only describe as wonder. There are humans. The perspective shifted again, and Marcus found himself looking down at Earth. But instead of seeing a small blue marble, he perceived it as Zephyr did, a blazing beacon of consciousness unlike anything else in the known universe. Every human mind glowed with fierce, chaotic, beautiful light. You are the only species we have encountered that responds to suffering by becoming more determined, not less. When you face impossible odds, instead of accepting defeat, you become creative. You adapt. You find new ways forward that no one, including yourselves, thought possible. Marcus saw flashes of human history through alien eyes. Cave painters creating beauty in the darkest places. Scientists working by candlelight during plagues. Parents reading stories to children while bombs fell overhead. Musicians composing symphonies in concentration camps. Humans building, creating, loving, and hopping in the face of absolute devastation. But I'm not like that, Marcus said, his consciousness floating in this sea of cosmic awareness. I'm failing, I'm broken. Are you? Zephyr's response came with a flood of images Marcus hadn't expected to see. Himself, 3 years ago when the plant closure was announced. Instead of raging or giving up immediately, he had spent weeks helping his younger coworkers update their resumes. He had shared his small savings with families who had nothing put aside. He had organized community meetings to discuss retraining programs. I see a human who, when faced with personal catastrophe, immediately began trying to help others, Zephyr observed. Even as your own world collapsed, your first instinct was to serve as a foundation for those around you. Marcus saw himself from outside, remembered feelings he'd buried under months of shame and alcohol, the fierce protectiveness he'd felt for his community, the way he'd pushed aside his own fear to become a pillar of strength for others. And when your marriage began to fail, Zephyr continued, you did not become violent or destructive as many beings might. You turned the anger inward rather than harm those you loved. That's not healthy, Marcus protested, even as he felt something shift inside his chest. No, but it demonstrates something remarkable about your species' moral compass. Even in your dysfunction, you were trying to protect others from your pain. This is not the behavior of a failed being, Marcus Williams. This is the behavior of someone whose very nature is oriented toward connection and care. The cosmic perspective began to fade, but Marcus retained the sense of belonging to something vast and meaningful. If humans are so special, why do so many of us feel so lost? Because your greatest strength is also your greatest vulnerability, Zephyr explained as they both returned fully to the abandoned lot behind the steel mill. You are built for deep connection, for community, for shared purpose. When those connections are severed, when your communities collapse, when your purposes feel meaningless, you experience existential pain that most species cannot even comprehend. Marcus looked around at the industrial wasteland that had once been the heart of a thriving community. So we're just too sensitive for our own good. You are perfectly calibrated for the universe you were meant to inhabit, Zephyr corrected gently. The problem is that your technological advancement has outpaced your social evolution. You've built systems that isolate individuals while pretending to connect them. You've created economies that prioritize efficiency over human flourishing. You've convinced yourselves that self-reliance is virtue when your true strength lies in interdependence. The alien's form was gradually becoming more solid, more present. Marcus realized the disorienting cosmic experience had been necessary to break through his assumptions, but now they were communicating being to being. My people have been observing Earth for several of your decades, Zephyr continued. We've watched human civilization approach a crucial turning point. You can either evolve beyond these systemic problems, or they will eventually overwhelm even your remarkable resilience. And what does that have to do with me sitting drunk in a parking lot? Everything? Zephyr's eyes held that impossible depth again. Individual healing and social transformation are the same process at different scales. When a human like you rediscovers their essential nature, when they reconnect with their capacity for growth and service, it sends ripples through the collective consciousness of your species. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense that he might actually matter. You're saying I could make a difference. I am saying you already are making a difference. The question is what kind of difference you choose to make from this moment forward. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself returning to the abandoned lot every evening, not to drink, but to meet with Zephyr. The alien's ship remained cloaked from human perception, but Marcus could always find it. These conversations became the anchor point around which the rest of his life slowly began to reorganize. Tell me about Emma, Zephyr said one evening as they sat on a pile of old concrete blocks, watching the stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. Marcus's chest tightened as it always did when he thought about his daughter. She's 8, smart as hell, loves dinosaurs and wants to be a paleontologist when she grows up. She has Sarah's eyes but my stubborn streak. He paused, swallowing hard. I used to call her every night, but lately she's been distant. Can't blame her. What would you like her to know about you that she doesn't currently know? The question hit Marcus unexpectedly deep. I guess that I'm not the man she saw falling apart, that the drinking, the anger, the despair, that's not who I really am. I want her to know that her dad is someone she can count on, someone who will always fight for her, even when he's fighting his own demons. And who is the man you really are? Marcus had to think about that. For months, the only identity he'd been able to access was failure, drunk, abandoned husband. But in these conversations with Zephyr, other aspects of himself had begun to resurface. I'm someone who builds things, he said slowly. Not just with my hands, but I build connections between people. I notice when someone's struggling and I try to help. When I was foreman at the plant, guys would come to me with problems, not just work stuff, but personal things. Their marriages, their kids, their fears about the future. You were a counselor as much as a supervisor. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess I was. Marcus picked up a small piece of concrete and turned it over in his hands. There was this kid, Tommy Brennan, fresh out of high school. His dad had died the year before, and he was trying to support his mom and little sister on an entry-level wage. He was so angry all the time, ready to fight anyone who looked at him wrong. Zephyr's skin shifted to warm gold tones, encouraging Marcus to continue. So I started having him work near me, just casual conversation at first. Turns out the anger was covering up terror. He was convinced he was going to fail his family the same way he thought his dad had failed them. His dad had a heart attack, you see. Tommy somehow believed that if he'd been a better son, somehow his dad wouldn't have died. What did you do? I told him about my own dad, how he worked at the same plant for 37 years, how he never missed a day even when he was sick. how he taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by what happens to him, but by how he responds to what happens to him. Marcus's voice grew stronger. I helped Tommy see that his father hadn't failed anyone. Sometimes life just breaks your heart, and the only failure is letting that break make you stop caring. And Tommy became one of our best workers, got promoted twice before the plant closed. Last I heard, he was managing a team at the new logistics center outside of town. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. He named his son after my dad. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, allowing the weight of that story to settle between them. This is what I mean about humans, he finally said. Your capacity to transform pain into wisdom, to use your own struggles as a foundation for helping others grow. This is remarkable among conscious species. But I couldn't do that for myself when everything fell apart. Because you were trying to carry the load alone. Tommy had you as a guide and support. Who did you have? Marcus realized the truth of it. When the crisis hit, he had pushed everyone away, convinced that his problems were his responsibility alone. I thought asking for help would make me weak. Your species has this backwards. Individual strength, as you conceive it, is actually a form of weakness because it cuts you off from your greatest resource, your connections to other humans. True strength lies in building networks of mutual support. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah's number appeared on the screen and his heart jumped into his throat. Emma wants to video call tonight at 8, the message read. She has something to show you. Marcus looked at the time, 7:45 p.m. I have to go, he said, standing quickly. Of course, but Marcus, Zephyr's form began to fade. Remember what you just told me about your father's definition of worth. How does that apply to your situation with Emma? The drive home felt different than any drive Marcus had taken in months. Instead of dreading the empty house, he found himself eager to see his daughter's face. When the call connected, Emma appeared on screen wearing a huge grin and a t-shirt covered in dinosaur illustrations. Dad, look what I made. She held up a clay sculpture of what might have been a brontosaurus, painted in bright purple with glittery spots. We made these in art class, and I made one for you. Emma, that's amazing. Tell me about it. For the next hour, Marcus listened to his daughter chatter about school, about her new friends, about the book she was reading about female paleontologists. He found himself laughing, really laughing at her jokes and observations. When she asked him what he'd been doing, instead of making excuses or changing the subject, he told her the truth. I've been figuring some things out, sweetheart. I've been sad for a while, and I'm learning how to be happy again. Are you going to be okay, Daddy? The question hit him like a physical force. In those 5 words, he heard all his daughter's worry, all the uncertainty he had created in her young life. Yes, baby, I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to make sure you know that you can always count on me no matter what. When the call ended, Marcus sat in his kitchen and looked around at the neglect of recent months. Dirty dishes, unopened mail, empty bottles. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the urge to take action. He started with the dishes. 2 weeks after the video call with Emma, Marcus walked into the community center for the first time since the plant closure. The building had seen better days, but volunteers had done their best to maintain it as a gathering place for displaced workers and struggling families. Tonight was the monthly support group meeting, and Marcus had finally worked up the courage to attend. The circle of folding chairs in the main room held about 15 people, faces he recognized from his old life. Jerry Martinez, who had run the quality control department. Linda Patterson, one of only 3 female supervisors the plant had ever had. Bob Chen, the safety engineer who everyone called Doc because of his careful, methodical way of explaining things. Marcus, Linda looked surprised to see him. God, it's been what, 6 months? Something like that. Marcus took an empty chair between Jerry and a woman he didn't recognize. Thought it was time I stopped hiding. The meeting was led by Dr. Amanda Foster, a social worker from the county who donated her time to help the group process their collective trauma. Tonight, I want to focus on moving forward, she said once everyone had settled in. Not forgetting what we've lost, but building on what we still have. Marcus listened as his former colleagues shared their stories. Jerry had finally found work at a warehouse, but the pay was half what he'd made at the plant. Linda was going back to school for her nursing degree at age 52. Bob had started a small consulting business, helping other companies improve their safety protocols. When Dr. Foster's eyes found Marcus, he felt the familiar surge of anxiety, but underneath it was something new. Zephyr's voice reminding him that his pain connected him to something larger, that his struggles were not evidence of failure, but of his deeply human capacity to care. "I'm Marcus Williams," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "I was a foreman in the rolling mill for 15 years. When we lost our jobs, I lost more than work. I lost my identity, my marriage, my relationship with my daughter. I've spent the last year drinking myself toward an early grave." The room was completely silent, but Marcus could feel the recognition in every face. They all knew this story because they all lived versions of it. "But recently I've been remembering something my dad taught me. He said that life will break your heart, guaranteed. The question is what you build with the pieces." Marcus looked around the circle. "I want to start building again." After the meeting, several people approached him. Tommy Brennan was there, along with his wife and baby son. "Marcus, man, I've been wondering how you were doing." Tommy's face was concerned but warm. "This is Maria, and this little guy is Henry Marcus Brennan." Marcus stared at the baby, overwhelmed by the honor of sharing his name. "Tommy, thank you." "Are you kidding? You saved my life back at the plant. When my dad died, I was ready to burn the world down. You showed me how to channel that energy into something useful." Tommy shifted the baby to one arm and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We missed you, man. A lot of us have been worried." Over the next hour, Marcus reconnected with people he had isolated himself from in his shame. He learned that Bob's consulting business was struggling because he didn't know how to market himself. Linda was having trouble with some of her science prerequisites and could use tutoring. Jerry's new job was decent, but he missed the camaraderie of working with a team that cared about each other. "You know what we should do?" Marcus found himself saying. "We should start meeting more than once a month, not for therapy but for problem solving. We've got decades of combined experience here. We know how to work together, how to support each other. Why are we treating this like a wake instead of a planning meeting?" Dr. Foster overheard and smiled. "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus. What do you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but we're all trying to rebuild our lives separately when we could be doing it together. Maybe Bob needs help with marketing, but Jerry's great with people, and Linda knows how to organize information. Maybe Linda needs science tutoring, but Bob's got the technical background and Jerry's patient as hell." The idea took shape over the following weeks. What started as an informal mutual aid network grew into something more ambitious. Marcus found himself at the center of it, not because he had all the answers, but because he had the ability to see connections between people's needs and resources. They called it the Phoenix Project, and it operated out of the community center 3 evenings a week. Bob's safety consulting business started taking off once Linda helped him create professional marketing materials, and Jerry began networking with his contacts in local industry. Linda not only got the tutoring she needed, but discovered she was brilliant at helping other people navigate bureaucratic systems. Jerry found that his people's skills were perfectly suited to becoming a job placement coordinator. "You're becoming a community organizer," Zephyr observed one evening as they met in their usual spot. The alien's ship was preparing to depart soon, but their friendship had deepened into something Marcus would treasure for the rest of his life. "I'm just doing what feels natural," Marcus replied. "Turns out helping people figure out their lives is something I'm good at." "It is your essential nature," Zephyr agreed. "This is what I tried to show you that first night. Humans are builders of connections. When you allow yourselves to operate from that fundamental drive, you create resilience that can overcome almost any challenge." Marcus thought about Emma, who was now calling him every few days and talking about maybe visiting for Christmas. He thought about Sarah, who had started sending him encouraging texts about the Phoenix Project. Their marriage might be over, but they were rebuilding something else. A foundation of respect and cooperation that would serve Emma better than their previous dysfunction. "I want to ask you something," Marcus said. "That first night you said my pain was calling across the void like a beacon. Were you just here for me, or are there others?" Zephyr's form shimmered with colors Marcus had learned to recognize as deep satisfaction. "There are others. Humans in crisis all over your planet, brilliant souls who have temporarily lost connection to their essential nature. Some of my people are having conversations similar to ours in places you would never expect." "Are we going to be okay?" Humanity, I mean. You are going to be extraordinary, Zephyr replied with certainty. Your species is approaching a transformation that will ripple across the galaxy. You are learning to build the kinds of communities and support systems that will allow every human to access their full potential. It will not be easy, and it will not be quick, but it is inevitable because it is who you really are. Marcus felt a deep peace settle over him. Thank you for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. I showed you nothing that was not already there. I simply helped you remember. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the parking lot of the new Phoenix Project headquarters, a renovated warehouse space they had managed to lease with funds from a combination of small business grants, community donations, and the profits from Bob's now thriving consulting firm. Emma ran across the asphalt toward him, her dinosaur backpack bouncing as she moved. Sarah followed at a more measured pace, but she was smiling. "Daddy, Daddy, show me the workshop." Emma crashed into his arms with the enthusiasm only 8-year-olds could muster. "Mom says you're teaching people how to build things." "Among other things," Marcus laughed, lifting his daughter and spinning her around. "How was your flight?" "Long, but the plane had tiny pretzels, and I read 2 whole chapters of my book about Mary Anning. Did you know she discovered the first ichthyosaur when she was only 12? "I did not know that. You'll have to tell me all about it." Marcus set Emma down and looked at Sarah. The awkwardness between them had faded over the months, replaced by something more comfortable. They would never be married again, but they had found their way to being partners in raising their daughter. "The place looks incredible," Sarah said, gesturing toward the building. "When you first told me about this project, I have to admit I was skeptical, but Emma talks about it constantly. She's so proud of what you're doing here." The tour that followed filled Marcus with pride in a way he hadn't experienced since Emma was born. The Phoenix Project had evolved far beyond what any of them had originally imagined. The main floor housed a wood and metalworking shop where displaced manufacturing workers taught job skills to younger people while simultaneously creating furniture and equipment for local nonprofits. The second floor contained meeting spaces where Linda ran financial literacy classes, Jerry coordinated job placements, and various volunteer professionals offered everything from legal advice to tax preparation. But Marcus's favorite space was the children's area, where Emma immediately gravitated. Kids whose parents were in classes or job training sessions could engage in supervised activities that were both fun and educational. Today, Tommy Brennan's 6-year-old daughter Sophie was showing younger children how to build simple machines with wooden blocks and pulleys. "The kids are learning engineering principles without even realizing it," Marcus explained to Emma as they watched Sophie demonstrate how a lever could lift heavy objects. "And the parents know their children are safe and engaged while they work on rebuilding their own lives." "Can I help?" Emma asked immediately. "I know lots about dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are basically ancient engineering projects. Bones are like structural supports, and teeth are specialized tools, and—" "I think we can arrange something," Marcus said, grinning at his daughter's enthusiasm. That evening, after Sarah and Emma had settled into their hotel, Marcus made his way to the old abandoned lot for what he knew would be his final meeting with Zephyr. The alien's ship hummed in the clearing, its surface more translucent than usual. "It is time for me to continue my journey," Zephyr said without preamble. "My work here is complete." "I know," Marcus had felt it building for weeks, a sense of conclusion and readiness. "I wanted to thank you one more time and to ask you something." "Ask." "That first night you said you came because my pain was calling across the void. But I think you came because my potential was calling, wasn't it? You didn't see a broken man. You saw someone who was ready to remember who he really was." Zephyr's skin shifted to warm gold and deep blue, colors Marcus had learned indicated profound approval. "You understand. Yes, pain often indicates potential trying to emerge. Suffering is frequently the birth cry of transformation." "Will I see you again?" "Perhaps not in this form, but our connection is permanent. Every time you help someone remember their essential nature, every time you build community where there was isolation, every time you choose growth over despair, you send ripples through the consciousness web that connects all thinking beings. I will feel those ripples wherever I am in the galaxy." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of it. "Before you go, will you tell me about where you're going next?" "There is a young woman in Bangladesh who leads a microcredit program for rural women. She's beginning to doubt whether her work matters because the global economic system seemed too powerful to change. She needs to understand how local transformation creates universal change. Zephyr paused. And there is an old man in Finland who has been developing sustainable farming techniques for Arctic conditions. He believes he is too late, that climate change will overwhelm any individual efforts. He needs to see how innovation spreads when it serves genuine human needs. Heroes, Marcus said softly. You're visiting heroes who don't know they're heroes yet. As I visited you. They stood in comfortable silence as the alien ship began its transformation sequence, becoming more and more ethereal until Marcus could see through it to the stars beyond. Marcus Williams, Zephyr's voice echoed as his form faded. Remember that you are not healing alone. Across your planet, thousands of humans are having breakthroughs similar to yours. You are part of a wave of awakening that will reshape your civilization. Trust the process. The ship became a column of light, then a distant star, then nothing. Marcus stood alone in the lot where his journey had begun, but he didn't feel alone. He felt connected to something vast and purposeful. 2 years later, the Phoenix Project had spawned similar initiatives in 47 cities across North America. Emma, now 10 and visiting for summer vacation, had become the unofficial director of the children's engineering program. Sarah had moved back to their hometown and was working as the project's development coordinator, having discovered she had a gift for grant writing and community partnerships. Marcus Williams, former factory foreman turned community organizer, stood before a conference of social entrepreneurs from around the world, sharing what they had learned about building resilient communities from the ground up. In the audience, he spotted faces that reminded him of his own face that night in the parking lot. People carrying enormous pain, but also enormous potential. People ready to remember who they really were. The most important thing I learned, he told the audience, is that individual healing and social transformation are the same process happening at different scales. When we help one person reconnect with their essential nature, we strengthen the entire network of human consciousness. When we build genuine community, we create models that can be replicated anywhere people are ready to choose cooperation over isolation. After his presentation, a young woman approached him. Her name was Dr. Priya Sharma, and she had traveled from Bangladesh where she ran a microcredit program for rural women. Your story resonates deeply with me, she said. I have been struggling with doubt about whether local work can create meaningful change in the face of global challenges. Marcus smiled, recognizing something familiar in her eyes. Let me tell you something a very wise friend once told me, he said. Individual actions create ripples that travel farther than we can imagine. Your work matters more than you know. Somewhere among the stars, Zephyr felt the wave of understanding pass between two humans and smiled in a way that had no human equivalent. The healing was spreading, as he had known it would. Humanity was remembering itself, one connection at a time.